The baby's cry shattered the morning silence like glass against stone. Kieran Valdris froze mid-step on his apartment stairs, his architect's portfolio slipping from numb fingers. That sound-high, desperate, achingly familiar dragged him back 3 years to sleepless nights and gentle lullabies he'd sung to steady his shaking hands. The knock came again, urgent and unrelenting. He yanked open the door and the world tilted. Standing before him was Lirelei Thorne, her auburn hair wild from rain, clutching a bundle of blankets that moved and whimpered. Her emerald eyes, the same ones that had haunted his dreams, were rimmed with exhaustion and something else, fear. "Hello." "Kieran." Her voice cracked like autumn leaves. The baby turned slightly, and Kieran's knees nearly buckled. Those eyes, storm gray and questioning, exactly like his own. The same stubborn cowlick at the crown, the same small birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on his left temple. "Caspian," he breathed, reaching out instinctively before pulling his hand back as if burned. "My son." Lirelei nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "They told me he died. The fire at the hospital nursery, they showed me a body, a death certificate. I grieved for 3 years, Kieran. 3 years I thought our baby was gone." The words hit him like physical blows. He'd been there that night, screaming as flames consumed the maternity ward, held back by firefighters while his world burned. They'd told him the same lie, shown him the same false evidence. He'd identified what he thought was his son's body, buried an empty coffin, and spent every day since drowning in guilt and whiskey. How? The question scraped his throat raw. "Illegal." "Adoption ring," she said, shifting the baby their baby hire against her chest. "Rich families paying millions for healthy infants." The fire was their cover. They saved 23 babies that night, Kieran. 23 children they stole from parents who thought their babies were dead. Caspian reached out with tiny fingers, grasping at the air between his parents. Kieran's chest constricted so tightly he couldn't breathe. "The FBI raided the compound yesterday," Lirelei continued, her voice gaining strength. "I got the call at 2 a.m. They had records, photos, DNA samples. I drove 14 hours straight from Portland to get him." Kieran stared at the child memorizing every perfect detail. The way he gripped Lirelei's shirt with fierce determination. The soft gurgling sounds that were almost words. The trust in those impossibly familiar eyes. "Can I ... double?" He swallowed hard. "Can I hold him?" Lirelei stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her jasmine perfume mixed with baby powder and desperation. "He's been asking for you. He doesn't even know me. He knows." She placed Caspian gently in Kieran's arms. "Somehow he knows." The moment his son settled against his chest, something shattered and healed simultaneously inside Kieran's heart. 3 years of grief evaporated like morning mist. Caspian looked up at him with ancient wisdom in infant eyes and made a soft, cooing sound that meant everything and nothing. "We have a son," Kieran whispered, the words feeling foreign and perfect on his tongue. "We have a son," Lirelei agreed, her hand covering his where it supported their baby's back. The next 3 days passed in a blur of bottles and diapers and a strange dance of two people learning to be parents together while navigating the minefield of their shared past. Kieran had transformed his sterile bachelor apartment into something resembling a nursery, pushing furniture against walls to make room for the crib Lirelei, assembled with the focused intensity of a woman reclaiming lost time. They moved around each other carefully, like survivors of the same disaster finally meeting in safe territory. Every interaction was weighted with 3 years of grief and the electric tension that had always existed between them, the same magnetism that had created Caspian in the first place. "He likes when you hum," Lirelei observed from the doorway, watching Kieran change their son's diaper with surprising competence. That little melody you always used to do when you were concentrating on blueprints. Kieran's hand stilled. He'd forgotten he'd been humming. Forgotten she remembered that unconscious habit from their brief, incandescent relationship. You remember that? I remember everything. She entered the room, settling beside him on the floor. I remember how you'd trace building designs on my back when you couldn't sleep. How you always ordered extra pickles on your sandwiches because you knew I'd steal them. How you said my name like it was music. The air between them crackled with unspoken words. They'd been young and wild and completely unprepared for love that felt like lightning in their veins. When she told him about the pregnancy, he'd panicked, not because he didn't want the baby, but because the depth of his feelings terrified him. He'd been 24 and afraid of forever. I was going to marry you, he said quietly, not looking at her, after the baby came. I had the ring picked out and everything, a vintage emerald cut to match your eyes. Liralay's breath caught. You never said, the night of the fire I was going to propose in the hospital room, while you were holding our son. His voice broke. I thought I'd lost everything. You, him, our future. I couldn't even look at you during the funeral without falling apart. I blamed you, she whispered. God help me. I blamed you for not being there when it happened. For not saving him somehow. I said terrible things. You were grieving. We both were. Caspian fussed, drawing their attention back to the present. Kieran lifted him carefully, marveling again at how perfectly his son fit against his chest. What? Happens now? I don't know. Liralay's honesty was refreshing after years of polite lies from well-meaning friends. I live in Portland. You're here in Denver. Caspian needs stability, routine. He's been through enough upheaval. So have you. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I've been existing, not living. Working double shifts at the hospital, coming home to an empty apartment, pretending I was healing when really I was just surviving. When they called about Caspian, it was like someone flipped a switch and I remembered what it felt like to be alive. Kieran studied her profile as she watched their son. She was thinner than she'd been 3 years ago, hollowed out by grief, but still breathtaking. Still the woman who'd walked into his architecture firm looking for someone to design her dream house and ended up redesigning his entire life. Stay, he said suddenly. Both of you, stay here. Kieran, not forever, not until we figure things out. But Caspian needs us both, and honestly. He met her eyes, letting her see the vulnerability he'd spent years hiding. I can't lose either of you again. I won't survive it. She was quiet for so long he thought she'd refuse. Then Caspian grabbed her finger with his tiny fist, and something shifted in her expression. 2 weeks, she said finally. Trial period. We see how this works, what's best for him. 2 weeks, he agreed, though they both knew 2 weeks would never be enough to heal 3 years of wounds or figure out if the love they'd once shared could survive the weight of their grief and the miracle of their son's return. The first week was a careful choreography of shared custody and tentative conversations. They took turns with night feedings, established routines, and slowly began to remember how to be around each other without the crushing weight of loss between them. Caspian thrived under their combined attention, as if sensing he was finally where he belonged. Kieran rearranged his work schedule to spend mornings at home while Liralay slept in. She'd taken a leave of absence from the Portland General Hospital, and the exhaustion of 3 years' worth of grief was finally catching up to her. He'd find her sometimes, curled up on his couch with medical journals scattered around her, and the sight would punch the air from his lungs. She belonged here. They all did. He's teething, Liralay announced on Thursday morning, emerging from the nursery with Caspian on her hip and determination in her step. We need those mesh feeders with frozen fruit and teething rings. The good kind, not the cheap. Ones that break. Kieran looked up from his laptop where he'd been trying to focus on blueprints for a new civic center. I'll go grab some. Hardware store run anyway, the crib rail is getting loose. I'll come with you. The words seemed to surprise her as much as they did him. For the past week, they'd been tag-teaming errands, rarely leaving the apartment together except for Caspian's pediatrician appointment. You don't have to. I want to. She shifted Caspian to her other hip, and their son immediately reached for Kieran with grabby hands. Besides, he's been fussing when one of us leaves. I think he's afraid we won't come back. The observation hit too close to home. Kieran closed his laptop and stood, accepting their son into his arms. Smart kid. Takes after his mother. His father's the one who bolted when things got complicated. The words hung in the air like smoke. They'd been dancing around the elephant in the room. The fact that he'd broken up with her 2 weeks after she'd told him about the pregnancy. Overwhelmed by the magnitude of becoming a father when he still felt like a kid himself. That wasn't about you, he said quietly. Or him. That was about me being 24 and scared shitless that I'd mess everything up. And now? He looked down at Caspian, who was trying to eat his shirt collar with single-minded determination. Now I'm 27 and still scared shitless. But I've learned the difference between running away from fear and running toward what matters. Something shifted in her expression, a crack in the careful walls she'd built around her heart. Double quotes Kieran ... I know we can't go back, he said quickly. Too much has happened. But maybe we don't need to. Maybe we can build something new. They went to 3 different stores. Target for baby supplies, Home Depot for crib hardware, and a small specialty shop where Lirelei found organic teething biscuits that cost more per ounce than gold. Kieran paid without complaint, mesmerized by watching her compare ingredients, and read product reviews on her phone with the fierce protectiveness of a mother making up for lost time. You're good at this, he told her as they loaded bags into his truck. Caspian was strapped into the car seat they'd installed with the precision of NASA engineers contentedly gumming a frozen mango in his mesh feeder. I'm terrified, she admitted. I missed his first smile, his first laugh, the first time he rolled over. I don't know his favorite lullaby or which foods he's tried or whether he's afraid of the dark, so we learned together. Kieran closed the truck bed and turned to face her fully. All of it. The things we missed and everything that comes next. She was crying again, something that seemed to happen without warning these days, emotions too big for her body to contain. He reached out, instinctively, brushing tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. I missed you, she whispered. God, Kieran, I missed you so much I forgot how to breathe. I never stopped loving you. The confession escaped before he could stop it. Not for a single day. Even when I thought you hated me, even when I was convinced I destroyed everything good in my life, you were still the first thing I thought about when I woke up and the last thing before I fell asleep. She leaned into his touch, and for a moment they were 24 again, standing in the summer rain outside her apartment after their first date, both knowing they'd found something rare and worth fighting for. The second week brought an intimacy that terrified them both. They fell into domestic rhythms that felt simultaneously foreign and perfectly natural. Shared coffee at dawn while Caspian slept. Late-night conversations over takeout containers, the easy way their bodies moved around each other in the small space as if choreographed by muscle memory. Lirelei had extended her leave of absence. The conversation with her supervisor had been brief and understanding. The hospital was used to accommodating traumatized staff, and her situation was extraordinary, enough to warrant extended compassion leave. Kieran had started working from home more, taking video calls with clients while Caspian napped in his arms. We need to talk about what happens next, Lirelei said on Sunday evening. They just put Caspian down for the night after a day at the park, and the apartment felt charged with unspoken possibilities. Kieran had been dreading this conversation. 2 weeks had passed in a blur of small miracles. Caspian's first real laugh, the way he'd started reaching for both parents equally. The night Lorelei had fallen asleep against Kieran's shoulder while they watched their son sleep. I know. Portland has a good pediatric unit. I could get my old position back, find us an apartment near the hospital. You could visit on weekends, holidays. We could make it work. Every word felt like a small death. Is that what you want? She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. No. Then why? Because wanting something and being brave enough to reach for it are different things. She turned to face him fully. I want to wake up every morning knowing Caspian is safe and loved. I want to build the life we were supposed to have before everything went wrong. I want to fall asleep next to you and not wonder if I'm dreaming. Kieran's heart hammered against his ribs. Lorelei. But I'm terrified, she continued. What if we try this and it doesn't work? What if we hurt each other again? What if Caspian gets caught in the middle when everything falls apart? He reached for her hands, threading their fingers together. What if we don't try and spend the rest of our lives wondering what might have been? That's not an answer. Here's your answer. He stood, pulling her with him, and led her to his desk where he'd been working earlier. Among the scattered blueprints and coffee-stained sketches was a folder he'd been afraid to show her. I've been working on something. Inside were detailed architectural drawings for a house. Not just any house, the house she'd hired him to design 3 years ago. The dream home they'd planned together before pregnancy and fear and tragedy had derailed everything, but these weren't the original plans. These were different, better. You kept them, she breathed, studying the elevations and floor plans with the eye of someone who understood the language of blueprints. I redesigned them. He pointed to specific features, a master suite with space for a bassinet, a playroom with built-in storage, a workshop where he could work from home, a reading nook by the kitchen window where she could study for medical conferences. For us, all of us. Her hands shook as she traced the lines of their imagined future. Kieran, this is beautiful, but we can't just, I bought the land. The words tumbled out before he lost his courage. The lot we looked at in Golden. I put an offer in the day after the funeral and never canceled it. I've been paying the mortgage for 3 years on a piece of empty ground because I couldn't let go of the dream. She stared at him as if he'd grown a second head. You bought our lot? I bought our lot. I kept our plans. I held on to everything, Lorelei, because letting go felt like losing you all over again. He took her face in his hands. I know it's crazy. I know we have 1,000 things to figure out and no guarantee any of this will work. But I'm not 24 anymore, and I'm not running away. I want to build this house. I want to build this life. With you? With our son. The tears came again, but these were different, not grief this time, but something that looked remarkably like hope. 3 months later, they broke ground on their house. The ceremony was small, just the 3 of them, Kieran's business partner, Magnus, and Lorelei's sister Cordelia, who had driven down from Fort Collins with champagne and a construction-themed outfit for Caspian. That made him look like the world's most adorable foreman. I can't believe you're actually doing this, Cordelia said, bouncing her nephew on her hip while they watched Kieran argue with the foundation crew about drainage specifications. Building a house together before you're even officially back together. It's either the most romantic thing I've ever heard or completely insane. Probably both, Lorelei admitted, but she couldn't stop smiling. The past 3 months had been a careful courtship, not just between her and Kieran, but between all 3 of them as a family unit. They'd found a rhythm that worked, a balance between friendship and something deeper, between co-parenting and falling in love all over again. They'd also found a temporary rental in Golden, a furnished cottage near the build site where they could oversee construction while maintaining the illusion of separate bedrooms. The illusion had lasted exactly 2 nights before Caspian's sleep regression had them taking shifts in the same bed. And then Kieran had gotten the flu and Lirelei had insisted on taking care of him. And somewhere between chicken soup and fever-induced confessions about how beautiful she looked in the morning light, the last of their walls had crumbled. "He's going to be a good father," Cordelia observed, watching Kieran demonstrate proper concrete mixing technique to their 9-month-old son. "He already is. The best," Lirelei agreed. "You should see him during teething episodes. He's got this whole system with frozen washcloths and baby massage and lullabies in 3 different languages. And you? How are you doing with all this domestic bliss?" It was a fair question. 6 months ago, Lirelei had been existing in a state of functional depression, going through the motions of living while feeling fundamentally hollow inside. Now she woke up every morning to the sound of Kieran making coffee and Caspian babbling from his crib, and the gratitude was so intense it sometimes took her breath away. "I'm happy," she said simply. "For the first time in 3 years, I'm actually happy." "Good. You deserve it." Cordelia handed Caspian back to her and checked her watch. "I should head back. David's cooking dinner, and you know how he gets when his risotto timing is disrupted." After she left, Lirelei and Kieran spent the afternoon walking the foundation. With Caspian strapped to Kieran's chest in a carrier that made him look like an outdoorsy single dad from a magazine ad, they discussed room layouts and fixture choices and the massive kitchen island that would serve as the heart of their home. "Second thoughts?" Kieran asked as they stood where their bedroom would be, imagining windows that would frame the Rockies, and morning light that would wake them gently. About the house? Never. She leaned against his side, careful not to jostle their son who was dozing against his father's chest. "About us? Daily. But not the kind that make me want to run." "What kind then?" "The kind that make me want to pinch myself. The kind that whisper this is too good to be true, and you don't deserve this much happiness, and something will go wrong." He understood. They'd both lived through enough loss to know that joy could be snatched away without warning. But they'd also learned that fear was a poor substitute for faith. "Something might go wrong," he said. "We might fight about paint colors and budget overruns and whose turn it is to get up with the baby. We might have days when we don't like each other very much." Wow, such reassurance. "But we'll have this." He gestured to their foundation, their beginning of their bet on forever. "We'll have proof that we chose each other, that we chose to build something together even when it was scary and uncertain and completely ridiculous." That evening they put Caspian to bed in his travel crib and sat on their temporary back porch with glasses of wine and the houseplant spread between them. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of coral and gold. And their future home was just a hole in the ground surrounded by building materials and dreams. "I love you," Lirelei said suddenly. "I never stopped loving you, not even when I hated you. Not even when I thought you destroyed everything good. In my life, I love you too." He reached across the table and took her hand. "All of you. The woman you were, the woman you are, the woman you're becoming. I love our son and our ridiculous faith in forever and the way you organize the diaper bag like you're packing for a NASA mission." She laughed and the sound was pure music. "Ah, you proposing to me over houseplans and baby bottles?" "Not yet," he said, "but soon, when the house is finished and Caspian can walk down the aisle with the rings. When we have a place that's truly ours to say yes in." "I'll say yes," she told him. "Whenever you ask, wherever you ask. The answer will always be yes." 8 months of construction flew by in a blur of permit delays, material shortages, and the 1,000 small decisions that transform blueprints into a home. They lived through a Colorado winter in their rental cottage, learning to navigate space heaters and Caspian's first solid foods and the strange intimacy of being snowed in together for 3 days straight. By spring, the house had walls and a roof and the bones of everything they'd dreamed. Kieran worked closely with every subcontractor, ensuring that every detail met his exacting standards. This wasn't just another project. It was the foundation of their family's future, and he refused to compromise on anything, from the energy-efficient windows to the radiant floor heating that would keep their barefoot toddler warm during Colorado winters. Lirelei had found work at Denver General, starting part-time in the pediatric ICU while they juggled construction schedules and Caspian's increasingly mobile exploration of the world. He'd taken his first steps in the half-finished living room, wobbling across subflooring to reach his father's outstretched arms while Lirelei cheered and recorded everything on her phone. He's going to grow up thinking construction sites are normal, she laughed, watching Caspian try to eat a paint sample while wearing a tiny hard hat Magnus had bought him. Good preparation for living with an architect, Kieran replied, rescuing the paint chip and replacing it with a teething toy. Everything's always under renovation. The final month was a marathon of 18-hour days, last-minute installations, and the organized chaos of making a house ready for habitation. Kieran barely slept, surviving on coffee and stubborn determination and the vision of carrying his family across their threshold. Lirelei found him at 2 a.m. on a Thursday, sitting on their unfinished front porch with his head in his hands and exhaustion in every line of his body. "Hey," she said softly, settling beside him with 2 mugs of tea. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's perfect." He accepted the tea gratefully, wrapping his hands around the warmth. "That's the problem. It's too perfect. Something has to go wrong." "Says who?" "Says 3 years of the worst luck imaginable." He leaned back against a porch pillar that still needed staining. "We lost our son, lost each other, lost everything we thought our future would look like. Now we have all of it back, plus this house, plus a second chance that most people never get. The universe doesn't hand out that many miracles to the same people." Lirelei studied his profile in the porch light, seeing the man she'd fallen in love with and the father he'd become and the builder who'd literally constructed their dreams from the ground up. What if the miracle isn't getting everything back? What if the miracle is learning that we're strong enough to build something better from the broken pieces? "You think we're better?" "Than before. I know we are." She reached for his free hand, threading their fingers together in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Before, we were kids playing house, terrified of making mistakes. Now we're adults who've survived the worst thing that could happen to parents and chosen to trust each other anyway. That's not luck, Kieran. That's courage." 2 weeks later, the final inspectors signed off on their certificate of occupancy. Kieran had planned an elaborate move-in celebration, but when the moment came, he wanted it to be just the 3 of them. Their first night in their forever home. No distractions or witnesses, just their little family crossing the threshold of their new beginning. He carried Caspian while Lirelei unlocked the front door with the key they designed together, an antique brass style that matched the house's craftsman details. The foyer smelled like fresh paint and new wood and the faint lavender sachets Lirelei had tucked into closets. "Welcome home," Kieran said, and the words felt like a benediction. They walked through every room, marveling at the way evening light fell through windows they'd positioned for exactly this purpose. Caspian babbled and pointed at everything, as if approving of his parents' choices. The nursery was painted a soft sage green with hand-stenciled trees reaching toward a ceiling dotted with glow-in-the-dark stars. The master bedroom faced east, for morning light, and south for the mountain views they'd wake up to every day for the rest of their lives. "One more thing," Kieran said when they'd completed their tour. He disappeared into his study and returned with a small velvet box that made Liralay's breath catch. "Kieran, I know I said I'd wait until the house was finished, but it is finished. We're here. Our son is asleep in his own room in our home that we built together." He dropped to one knee in their living room, surrounded by boxes that needed unpacking and furniture that needed arranging and all the beautiful chaos of a life in progress. "Liralay Thorne, will you marry me? Will you let me love you and Caspian and whatever babies might come after him for the rest of my life? Will you help me fill this house with laughter and arguments and birthday parties and Christmas mornings and all the ordinary magic that makes a family?" The ring was exactly what she would have chosen, a vintage emerald cut stone in a platinum setting that caught the light like captured starfire. But it was his words that undid her, the promise of not just romance but partnership, not just love, but a lifetime of building dreams together. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." They married on an October morning in their backyard, surrounded by golden aspen trees and the people who had carried them through their darkest seasons. Cordelia served as maid of honor while Magnus stood up as Kieran's best man, and Caspian toddled down the aisle in a miniature suit, scattering flower petals with the serious concentration of a child given an important job. The ceremony was brief and heartfelt, officiated by the hospital chaplain who had counseled them both through grief and now had the joy of witnessing their renewal. When they exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the small gathering. "I promise to choose you," Liralay said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. "Every day, in every season, through every challenge life might bring. I promise to build our dreams together, to trust your heart even when I'm afraid, and to love you with all the passion and tenderness you deserve." Kieran's response was equally simple and profound. "I promise to be the man you and Caspian deserve, to face my fears instead of running from them, to build not just houses but a home filled with safety and joy and the kind of love that grows stronger with each passing year." When they kissed as husband and wife, Caspian clapped his hands and shouted, "Mama, Dada," with such enthusiasm that the entire wedding party burst into laughter. The reception was held in their unfinished basement, strung with fairy lights and decorated with sunflowers and the architectural drawings that had started it all. They danced to acoustic versions of songs that had soundtracked their courtship, ate cake that Cordelia had baked herself, and listened to toasts that ranged from heartfelt to hilariously embarrassing. To second chances, Magnus raised his glass during the final toast, to the courage it takes to rebuild after loss, and to the family that proved love really can conquer everything, even really terrible timing and the world's longest construction. Delays? As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Kieran and Liralay found themselves alone on their back deck, sharing a bottle of champagne while Caspian slept upstairs in his crib. The mountains were silhouetted against a star-filled sky, and their house glowed with warm light behind them. "No regrets?" Kieran asked, pulling his wife closer against the October chill. "Only that we waited so long," she replied. "That we wasted 3 years being apart when we could have been healing together. Maybe we needed those 3 years. Maybe. We needed to become the people who were ready for this." She considered that, thinking about the woman she'd been before, young, eager, but ultimately unprepared for the depth of love and loss that life could contain. The woman she was now had been forged in fire, tested by grief, and had emerged stronger and more grateful for every ordinary miracle. "I used to think our story was tragic," she said. "Two people who loved each other but couldn't make it work. A baby lost to circumstances beyond our control. All those years of thinking we'd missed our chance. And now? Now I think our story is about patience. About the universe taking its time to give us everything we needed, not just each other, but the wisdom to appreciate what we have." the strength to protect it, the faith to believe in forever. They went inside together, checking on Caspian one more time before retreating to their master bedroom. The space was still partially unpacked, boxes stacked against walls that would eventually hold family photos and artwork and all, the accumulated treasures of a life shared. But the bed was made with wedding gift linens, and the windows framed a view they'd wake up to for decades to come. "I love you, Mrs. Valdres," Kieran whispered against her hair as they settled into sleep. "I love you too, husband. Both of you. Forever." Down the hall, Caspian slept peacefully in his own room, dreaming whatever dreams 18-month-olds have, probably, involving trucks and dogs and the absolute security that comes from being deeply, completely loved. His parents had given him something rare and precious, a home built not just on passion, but on the kind of mature, tested love that could weather any storm dot in the months and years that followed. They would add to their family first a daughter, named Serafina, with Liralay's green eyes and Kieran's stubborn determination, then twin boys who kept them laughing and exhausted in equal measure. They would renovate and expand, adding bedrooms and play spaces and a workshop where Kieran taught all 4 children the satisfaction of building something with their own hands. There would be challenges, of course. Sleepless nights and financial stress and the ordinary disagreements that come with any partnership. But they had learned the difference between problems that could break them and problems they could solve together. And always, in the kitchen where they gathered for breakfast, every morning, hung the framed photo from that first day Liralay standing at their front door with baby Caspian in her arms, Kieran's face just visible in the doorway, all 3 of them beginning the greatest adventure of their lives. Some love stories begin with lightning strikes. Others unfold slowly, like houses built brick by brick, room by room, dream by dream. Theirs was the second kind, patient and deliberate and strong enough to last forever.